Hello. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to see you all. I am thrilled to have you in our webinar here for Stanford Lifestyle Medicine today, looking at a very hot topic of supplements. So I am Dr. Rachele Pojednic. I'm the Director of Education here at Stanford Lifestyle Medicine. I'm also an adjunct lecturer in the Human Biology department where I teach sports nutrition, and we talk about supplements all the time in that space. And so I'm thrilled to be inviting you here to talk about the wild west that is the world of supplements with my two guests, Dr. Rachele Oppezzo and Dr. Sean Spicer. So before we intro the session here, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Oppezzo and then Dr. Spencer to give you a brief overview of their background, and then we will take it away.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm a dietitian. I got my master's in nutrition, and then I went back to get my PhD to study learning sciences and behavioral sciences. And right now, I'm all in the world of muscle and menopause for my research. And so I'm at the School of Medicine right now and working with the Stanford Lifestyle Medicine group.
And Dr. Spencer.
Great, thank you. Excited to be here. I am a gastroenterologist and physician scientist here at Stanford. I obtained my PhD in the middle of med school in nutritional immunology, studying how nutrient intake is sensed by the immune system to regulate inflammation. And as part of my postdoctoral studies, I looked at how nutrition affects the microbiome. Ultimately, in trying to understand how we can use food and bugs to optimize gut health and our microbiome, which we know is so important for health, and looking forward to answering any questions today about microbiome-focused supplementation.
Terrific. I think you both hit on all of the buzzwords right now: healthy aging, women's health, muscle, the gut microbiome, bugs. So I am thrilled to have these two experts with us here today. So we are going to get started. A little bit about my background and why I am moderating this session today. I have a PhD in nutritional biochemistry. I've been studying supplements, including vitamin D, CBD, and now some B vitamin derivatives, if you've been following the NR and NAD space. I also just recently transitioned to industry, so I bring kind of a unique perspective from that scientific lens. So we're here today to talk about supplements, and I think it's just really important that we level set here on what this industry actually looks like. So when we look at the global wellness industry, and this is everything, supplements, fitness, wellness, it is a $1.8 trillion industry, $1.8 trillion. Pharmaceuticals, by contrast, are only 600 billion. So it is only 1/3 of the fitness and wellness space when we think about that globally. When we look at supplements specifically, it's somewhere between 55 and 70 billion dollars, with growth rates ranging from somewhere between 5 to 8% annually. So it's a huge business. And the other thing that's really important is that consumers, you all, are about 82% of you say that wellness, and particularly dabbling in supplements to help that wellness, is a priority. So people are really, really interested in this supplement space. And when we look at these new formats like gummies, powders, personalized blends, stacks, if you will, that's the new hot term, right? Along with the rising consumer interest, we see that these are huge drivers, and supplements in the industry is not going away. But there is very little data on the supplements out there and how they work. And so that's why we convened this panel. In fact, when you look at the sports performance, the human performance literature, there's actually only 5 supplements that have enough evidence that there was a paper released to say that they believe that there's efficacy. So spoiler alert, it's caffeine, creatine, we're going to talk about creatine, beta-alanine, bicarb, and nitrates. And in fact, when we go actually into the market, and this study gets done fairly regularly, they go and buy a bunch of bottles in the stores and test to see what's actually in them. only about 15 to 50% actually have in the bottle what is on the label. So we have a lot of work to do in the supplement space to not only talk about what is the evidence behind these supplements, but also how can we be good consumers of both the science and the products themselves. So if you have questions, I am going to be looking at the Q&A for the next hour and jotting down your questions. Please give a thumbs up to the question if somebody asks your question. That way it will bring it up to the top of the list and I can make sure to ask our experts. But before we even get to the nitty-gritty of the supplements that work, that don't, I'm going to turn it over. First, I'll start with Dr. Oppezzo and then I'll switch to Dr. Spencer. Does anybody actually need a supplement? Let's start there. Dr. Oppezzo, you go first.
Okay. I think it's a trick question because anyone who says every X needs Y supplement, I think is selling you something. So I think the annoying answer is it depends. What I like to do is I like to be Marie Kondo about it and be like, let's dump all of your supplements on the table and see which ones spark joy. If you have a deficiency in a nutrient and you can show me that you do, then yes, I really do think that a supplement could help. If like a lot of us, we either have like a desperate problem we're trying to solve and we can't find an answer, or we're worried well and we like don't want to have a problem and we want to optimize every possible minute of every possible moment in our lives. And we think, oh, because XYZ said that this random oil from this random bush in the deep in the jungle that only this one person sells to really rich people is going to help. Then I'm like, let's look at the details a little bit more, right? So like maybe, maybe not. Um, and then there's a third category as if you're looking to try and treat a disease because a supplement is natural and you're afraid of taking a medication. I like to have a conversation of like, just because the supplement doesn't have this long list of side effects that they mumble through with the like happy Frisbee commercials in the background. The drug industry, like you said, is whether or not you want to love it or not, it has millions and millions of dollars and 10 to 15 years of research and rigorous studies that look at what are the possible side effects. Is it safe? What is the dose that's going to work? What is the form of the dose that's going to work? When you get your insulin, for example, at the drugstore, at the pharmacy, you know that insulin is exactly the form that's going to get into you and going to work for this amount of glucose for your body. We have zero of that for supplements. The reason why they don't list the side effects is because nobody's ever studied them. So I do like to say if you're looking at it as a drug replacement, then we need to have a different kind of conversation. And as much as people distrust big pharma, I think big suppla is sneaking under the radar right now, like getting away with the bank. Not saying that all supplements are bad and have no research. There are supplements that have research, and Rachel pointed out 5. But companies are racing out past their skis because why study them? People will buy them. So all we need is pretty packaging and an influencer. So I guess I want to say the answer is it depends.
I love that. Also, trying to do the science in the supplement world right here. So there are some of us out here that are trying to get out and over our skis.
Yes, like Rachel, but doing it the right way, right? Like rigorous studies, you're bringing scientific method to the industry, and that's what is really special about you.
Oh, that's very kind. Dr. Spencer, what do you think? Does anybody need a supplement?
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Oppezzo. I think the real thing is to kind of get to first principles about what you're hoping to accomplish with said supplement. You are tired, you lack focus, you have bloating, you're looking for performance. And I think that's really going to inform what you're looking for in a solution. And I think kind of thinking as the supplements as their name suggests, they should supplement what you are doing to fix that problem, whether that be traditional medical care, drugs, or on the inverse, lifestyle approaches, right? If you are tired and you're sleeping 4 hours a night, the solution should not necessarily, the first approach should not be to take a supplement, but it may be to address your sleep habits. That's not possible all the time, right? And that's where caffeine might come in as a supplement for someone who may not be able to sleep for a short period of time. But I think the key thing to reiterate is that you need to identify a problem and then approach that problem holistically, ideally through lifestyle approaches, or if your problem is severe enough, through medical approaches and interfacing with the medical system. And then how supplements layer on top of that, I think, should be your consideration. And when we think of clinical interventions and ones that are tested, for a drug to be approved by the FDA, it has to have an indication. And I think supplements should be thought of in a similar way of what are you hoping, what gap are you trying to fill, or what symptom are you trying to address, or what problem are you trying to solve? And that should inform what supplement you're going for. So I would say I agree, it depends. I think for some people, supplements can be really powerful, but I think if you are having a symptom or a problem that you want to solve, I think a supplement is not necessarily going to be the solution. I think it should be part of a potential solution.
I so appreciate that. And I think one thing I would really like to highlight about the two guests today, and I am highly under-credentialed compared to you two folks, that you actually work in the clinical space. So Dr. Spencer has an MD, PhD, so you see people as both patients as well as consumers, as well as Dr. Oppezzo, who's a registered dietitian, which is why I was so excited to bring you two together today, because you have such a wealth of knowledge of the clinical space as well as the nutrition space. So Dr. Spencer, I'm going to stick with you as we kind of dive down this path for a second here. You specifically look at people and gut health, right? And this is so hot right now. And I think there's a lot of buzzwords around gut health. And so I'm wondering if you can take us through a couple of minutes here and just talk to us about what is gut health, and are there maybe one or two supplements that you think actually can help with gut health? Because there's a lot of hype out there around this space.
Mhm. I think that my view on gut health is centered around, because of my bias, is food. I see a lot of patients in clinic who have specific food intolerances, or for whatever reasons are not able to capture the full breadth of food intake. And I think that an ideal GI system, you can eat, and on the back end you can poop, and everything is working really well on both ends. And then in the middle is a bit of a black box, but it's working. When you eat food, you're not bloated. When you're having bowel movements, you are not constipated. You're not having diarrhea. It's that sweet spot that all of us strive for, is to be able to eat the fuel for performance and have all of that happening under the hood, kind of without us knowing, right? Not having digestive complaints, having that perfect bowel movement that we all strive for about once a day with minimal effort. And when things go off the tracks, as we know they do for so many people, in surveys, when they survey the U.S. population in an unbiased way, 60 to 80% of all people in the US have some symptomatic GI complaint. So I think the need space here is quite large. A lot of healthy people, a lot of people with either one medical disorder or many, have GI complaints. And gut health is figuring out how to optimize the system so you're eating whatever you want, you feel great doing it, and you're having normal bowel movements on the back end. And I think the key thing is, again, I think these supplements should be problem based. If you are having problems with constipation, I think the first approach should be potentially getting more fiber in your diet. We know that the recipe for a good bowel movement is having size and good bulk to it. And the key to that is having fiber in your diet. So these are the components of your diet that are non-absorbed, that get to your colon and basically form the meat of the stool that you pass. And we know that of the recommended amount of fiber, 90% of people in the US are not meeting the recommended daily value of fiber. So I think first, the best place to get fiber is in the form of whole foods, and that should always be your first supplement. I would think that the adjustment that I try and give patients in my clinic is that you can consider whole foods a supplement. If they're not in your diet, whole foods should be the supplement that you are using for your medical care and for your diet. And if you really want a fiber supplement, I like organic psyllium husk. That is probably the number one supplement that I recommend. It's plant-based, organic, single ingredient, has a lot of fiber that's non-fermentable. There's two types of fiber that we'll probably talk about today. There's the fiber that your bugs use and the fiber that your bugs are probably not going to use. And the fiber that your bugs are not going to use is more of the psyllium husk. It's non-fermentable. It's going to pass through you and give your stool that really nice bulk. So my answer would be, if you had to pick one supplement, it would be organic psyllium husk. And it's also good for loose stools as well. So it brings everyone towards the middle. So it's one that works well with most GI tracts.
All right, that's awesome. So you heard it here first, team. Food is a supplement, number one. And number two, if you are going to add on to your diet, then psyllium husk. I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Spencer, on the fiber, and then the people need to know about probiotics. So coming your way in just a second. Dr. Oppezzo, as a dietitian, what are your thoughts on in this space of sort of like muscle and healthy aging? What are some supplements that you see? We'll start with work, and then I'll come back to you with don't work in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, work, I'm going to start with referencing one of my academic heroes, Stuart Phillips, who I think is like the world's leading protein and muscle researcher. He has a cake analogy that I like to use to people because I think it's really important when we're talking about supplements and what works, is to get an idea of how big the effect is. So if you're going to invest in something, where would you invest your time and money? So he likes to say that resistance training when it comes to muscle is the cake. That's the biggest thing. It's the huge cake. Protein is the frosting on top of the cake, and creatine is the sprinkles on top of that, and everything else is just like barely there. And I can break this analogy because as a kid, I would just eat the frosting, but the cake is the biggest effect size here. So let's talk. So resistance training is going to be what I'm going to say. If you want for muscle, that's the biggest bang for your buck. Protein comes in like second, but it's a very distant second. And it comes with a lot of ifs. So it's very necessary, but it's not sufficient for muscle. So you can't just munch on buffalo sticks and watch squat videos and then have that protein just go turn to muscle. But let's pretend you are strength training. So if you're getting enough protein, any source from animal or plant, if you're getting enough, which to me, I think I've seen the best estimates between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So how do you get your kilograms per body weight? You take your pounds and you divide by 2.2. I like to have people, I see people who are resistance training, who are older, and sometimes women maybe edging more towards 1.6, but beyond that, we don't have a lot of great evidence to show that more than that is going to be any beneficial. So if you're getting enough protein in that range and you're getting enough calories, which is really important here, then you don't need balloons. You don't need to supplement with protein. I don't know how I get these little images that happen all the time, but I love it. So if you get enough protein and you're getting enough calories, you don't need to supplement with protein. If you're in a caloric deficit and you can't get that 1.6 grams per body weight for protein, then you'd benefit from a supplement of protein. So when you're in a caloric deficit, you actually need a little bit more protein because some of that protein is going to be used for your glucose. You can't really get that from fat. You've got to get that from protein. Your protein's like, dude, I can't worry about the immune system right now. We're dying. Like, I need my brain to have some glucose. So you're just like, okay, so some of that protein is not going to be used for your muscle. I also like to tell people building your muscle is like remodeling your kitchen. If you're not paying your electricity bills with your calories, you're not going to remodel your kitchen. You want to handle the electricity bills first. And that's what the evidence seems to show. If you're getting enough calories and you're barely getting the RDA of protein, and you're unwilling to like change whatever diet you have, then you would also benefit from a supplement. So I guess what I want to foreground is that if you can get it from food and you're not on a caloric deficit and you're strength training, I don't think you need a supplement. Now, there are situations like my mom, for example, she's like really happy with one egg. And I'm like, that's 6 grams of protein, mom. We need to get more out of you. And she's like, well, I can't eat that much more. I'm super full. That's a great situation where, I ask her to have some protein powder instead. So that's protein. That's the frosting. Do you want to hear about the sprinkles or should we like take a break?
I want to hear about sprinkles.
Do you have anything to say about protein, Rachel? I mean, you're
I
also.
mean, I think you totally nailed it. Yeah, that's, thinking about how you can, again, one theme that we're pulling out here is food first is really important, making sure that you're getting enough calories and that you're getting those requirements from the actual food. And then supplement literally means we want to be supplementing the diet. So yeah, I think that that's a super important message here. And then when we put the frosting on the cake, we've got our protein on, we're doing our strength training. Now the people want to know, and I'm going to bring it back over to Dr. Spencer in just a second, but we got to start with a little bit of myth busting. What about the creatine? Because I think that's a sprinkle that you need to talk about.
Yeah, it's an important sprinkle. But again, sprinkle compared to the cake. What is creatine? It's a compound that comes from 3 amino acids. You get a little bit in your diet if you eat a lot of red meat, and we can make it in our bodies. But the main point of creatine, just so ATP, if you have heard of that, adenosine triphosphate, that's our energy system, especially for quick energy. Like we use this system called phosphocreatine. So what happens is the ATP like releases a phosphate and you get all this energy and you're like super stoked. And then phosphocreatine comes along and he's like, all right, here you go. Here's another phosphate group. And now this ATP, which became ADP, is like, whoa, thanks. I've got that. Now I can burst again with energy. So where creatine helps is that kind of like part where you don't use oxygen for your movement. So it's like a quick burst, it's like a rep, or it's like power, or it's like a jump. And so phosphocreatine is kind of like the corner person. So like, the boxers, the ATP, it comes back to the corner. Phosphocreatine's like, here you go, and you go back in the ring. So that's what creatine is good for. It's like one of the safest, most studied supplements. It's been around for over 100 years in the literature. Whoa, like what other supplement has that background, right? I mean, that's some street cred. Um, is it effective for muscle strength? Okay, just speaking about muscle strength, if you're not resistance training, it does nothing. Pretty much nothing. But that's not saying it's not doing other stuff, but for adding on top of like no resistance training, it's just like, that's cool. It might be helping other stuff. So it's sort of like protein in that sense. Like you need the cake. If you're also resistance training, then you can get like between 5 and 15% improvement in power, plyo, and reps. Turns out that's actually not as strong in women, shockingly, but it does better for women in other things. And it still has some improvement. What about muscle size? So a lot of people are like, whoa, am I going to get like all this water? And the answer is, well, kind of, maybe for a little bit. And we just saw a study that showed that if you take the creatine in, the way that the creatine gets into your cells is this sodium transport, which brings water with it. So for creatine to get in and be like at the corner of the ring, giving its phosphate groups, it's got to bring water with it. So it sort of swells it brings sodium with it, which brings water with it, which sort of swells up the cell a little bit. So you see people that had like lower creatine stores get like kind of more swelled cells and they get this water retention. And I kind of want to ask you, Rachel, what you think. To me, like once your stores are maxed, it's not going to add any more water. But then when you use it a little bit and then you put more in, like it's like kind of you empty your cabinets and then you add a little bit back in every day, every rep. I think the water retention is minimal after maybe the first like couple of weeks. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think that, if we're thinking about the bloating, and there's a couple of questions in the chat about, should we be worried about timing? Should we be worried about bloating? What about water weight? I think in general with creatine, as Dr. Oppezzo said, it's going to pull a little bit of water into your muscle, which could actually be performance enhancing at some level. And then it will kind of consistently work its way out as long as you are taking your creatine on a regular basis. So that was a question in the chat, is how often should you be taking it daily is the recommendation. And then do you need to time it around workouts? No, as long as you are pulling it in daily, because as Dr. Oppezzo said, it's just going to saturate the concentration in your muscles. All right, so I'm going to pull it back over to Dr. Spencer here for just a second. And then Dr. Oppezzo, I'm going to come back to you to do a little myth busting on creatine in just a second. Okay. All right. So Dr. Spencer, the world must know. Probiotics. Are we spending our money on them because they're not cheap? Do they work? Do they not work? What are you seeing in the clinic? What are you seeing in the science?
Good question. I think the answer is we don't know, because a lot of probiotics are not clinically tested. And then the second answer is it depends, again, on what the problem is that you're trying to fix. And I think I just want to take a step back and convey my worldview on these things, because I think in the gut health space, there's a lot of moving parts, and it's good to just disentangle what you're trying to target. I think for a while, probiotics were meant to target the microbiome. And what we're learning is that probiotics more than likely target us with their direct inflammatory potential, either with their metabolites or the structures that they have themselves. So a lot of the clinical trials that are run more recently have a control arm where they have heat-killed probiotic. And surprisingly, in a lot of the trials, the heat-killed product that's not alive does work, and it works equally as well as the product that's alive. And I think that these are always good controls. It doesn't necessarily mean that the product doesn't work. It just means that it doesn't need to be alive to work. And this is an important part because a lot of the probiotics that we take don't colonize. They're not designed to colonize. They don't change our microbiome. And it is possible that they don't need to change our microbiome to work.
Wait,
That said,
can I just, did you just say, because this is not what I'm reading in the literature out there or the headlines, did you just say that probiotics don't colonize the gut?
when they study this, so when probiotic manufacturers give a probiotic and then have a washout period and then look for that probiotic, it's often not detectable. That may mean that we don't know how to detect it. It may mean that it's in different places in our body, maybe the small intestine rather than the feces. But the clinical evidence or any evidence that a current over-the-counter probiotic colonizes is scant to non-existent.
Head exploding emoji right here. All right, keep going. I'm sorry, I had to just.
But I think this again, what I said, that the paradigm of our understanding of their benefit may be false, but their benefit may still exist. And I think that that is important to recognize, that a probiotic may have benefit. It may not need to be alive to have its benefit. And I think this is the second caveat that I'll convey, is that the thought is that even if probiotics don't colonize, that they have to exist in your GI tract for a reasonable amount of time for them to make the beneficial metabolites. We know that probiotics do make beneficial metabolites, and I want to enter into this other category of probiotic containing foods and fermented foods. Because the beauty of fermented foods is that these lactobacilli that are the most commonly sold probiotic, they exist in fermented foods, and they eat the food and they make all of these really anti-inflammatory beneficial metabolites. So if we don't need live microbes, or if we're don't need the live probiotic to have its benefit, then we can simply consume fermented food that have these dead lactobacilli and the beneficial metabolites. And indeed, in clinical studies, when they look at the effect of fermented foods, they're now emerging as a really potent anti-inflammatory mediator, and also can likely, via affecting the immune system, change the microbiome to a slight degree in a positive way. So I think that it's almost liberating in thinking that probiotics don't need to colonize, they don't need to change our microbiome, because then fermented foods really come on the table, and that probiotic containing foods, and especially these beneficial metabolites within fermented foods, are kind of loosely considered postbiotics, although not technically postbiotics. They're just anti-inflammatory metabolites that don't quite have a formal scientific name yet. But I think these are really good options for people on this call, all of the listeners. And what is popular now is just to take a probiotic capsule and just put it in milk and to make yogurt at home. I think fresh yogurt is a wonderful supplement. Fermenting at home is fun, and that's when the most potent bioactivity of those metabolites is when they're fresh. So that's a great option.
Fermenting at home is fun. I love that. That's like a tagline I want to put everywhere.
I love that. We have a colleague, Dr. Christopher Gardner, who makes his own kombucha. He's got a SCOBY he's very proud of. And so it's definitely a theme among our colleagues here. Dr. Spencer, can you give a list of, just if people don't really understand what these probiotic foods are, there's people asking in the chat, can you give a list of like a few of the probiotic foods that you would recommend besides yogurt?
Yeah, so I think the most common that we know are yogurt. Adjacent to that would be kefir. These are fermented dairy products. Fermented vegetables would be like your sauerkrauts, your kimchis. You can really ferment any vegetable. You can ferment carrots, beets. You can take the juice from that and you can drink it. There's a lot of options. And then there's yeast-based ferments. These are more of our misos. So you may not appreciate, but miso is where you take beans and you ferment it with a yeast rather than a bacteria. And then kombucha, of course, is a different type of fermentation. And that's the other important thing that I want to convey, is that because of these different types of fermentation, they'll have vastly different metabolites. So if you were to compare, and we've done this, if you were to compare kombucha versus sauerkraut, their metabolite profiles are very different. And that's the key, because if you're taking kombucha and you think that you're getting all of your fermented foods, you might want to think about adding in a fermented dairy if you consume dairy, or a fermented vegetable if you're not a dairy consumer. And this also a great opportunity to get protein. Fermented dairy is a really good option, particularly for athletes. It has a lot of anti-inflammatory metabolites, a lot of protein, a lot of healthy fats, and that's the other thing. These bugs, we're starting to learn, can change the inflammatory potential of the fats within dairy as well. So this is an area that we need to look more into, but it is possible that these bugs are actually transforming potential inflammatory substances within foods to anti-inflammatory substances. So there's a real potent opportunity for biotransformed foods in the future.
That is, Marilee just said it, and she was on mute, but I'm just gonna say it out for her. That is so cool to be thinking about how that works. I think the other thing that I really want people to understand as they're listening to both Dr. Spencer and Dr. Oppezzo is that their labs are on the leading edge of this research. So any of the hype and the headlines that you're seeing kind of out into the world, Dr. Spencer's lab is doing the best research in the world right now, I would argue, on these products and the inflammatory markers. And so I think one thing that I'm hearing and I'm pulling from both of you is that the hype is real. There's a lot of products out there that are trying to sell us on a particular pathway or anti-inflammatory or fill in the buzzword. And it seems like the research is just really, we're getting there. There's some cool things that you're talking about, Dr. Spencer, but it's really, it's not nearly as settled as a lot of these headlines would have us think.
Yeah, the thing I want to add to that is that In all the hype, there's a good amount of truth. And even as scientists, we see the potential. That's why we're dedicating our lives to work on it, because we think it's an important problem. We think that it's an important problem that can deliver to people and give them something that would be of benefit. And I think that's the difficult space, is because it is an area with tremendous potential benefit, but it needs to be paired with evidence and mechanism. But I think this is always tough because evidence is expensive and takes a long time. And we want to deliver a product that works quickly. And so it's always a balance of these two things. So I think as informed consumers, I think everyone here is already in the perfect space because they've thought to attend this and think about the problem. And I think the information is more available than ever. So I just want to reiterate that the hype is somewhat reflective of true potential, but we just really need to move the needle on this as quickly as possible in the clinical trials and academic space.
That's amazing. And I'm going to come back to you in just a minute, Dr. Spencer, on where you think the literature is going and maybe a supplement or two that you're keeping your eye on. Dr. Oppezzo, I'm coming back to you for a little bit of myth busting. So this is going to be a two-part question on two different supplements. I'm getting a lot of questions about creatine and brain health. So can you address that a little bit? Because I know we had talked about that a bit before the webinar started. And then the second one is kind of the question that I asked Dr. Spencer. Is there a supplement that's out there that you're just kind of like, I don't know if this is doing anything? So start with creatine and then move on to one that you're just kind of like, I'm not great. I'm not totally enthused.
Exciting. Okay, well, thank you. And we can tag team this as well. One thing I did want to also address is some, rightly concerned people were wondering about kidney health and creatine. It is true that it is cleared by your kidneys. So any excess creatine is going to be cleared by them, and it will elevate serum creatinine levels. So if you are like looking at your serum creatinine levels and you've been taking creatine, they will be elevated. So what you need to do is, if you want to look at what's really going on with your creatinine levels, you need to stop creatine for like 1 to 2 weeks before you take that test. And then you can see, is it falsely elevated because you're taking creatine? I have not seen any literature to back the claim or worry about it accelerating or causing kidney disease. But definitely, if you do have kidney disease or compromised kidney function, it is something to tell your doctor and talk to them about first. Just because we don't have clear causal inference in the literature, doesn't mean that isn't something that, if you already have something that's compromised, like your kidneys, to check into it about. So stay tuned on that. But right now, if you have normal kidney function, just stop it 1 to 2 weeks before checking your kidney function. So creatine in the brain is super exciting. That's the new space, which is really cool. We were talking about it for the muscle. As we were talking, Rachel, is like, some people are like, oh my gosh, I have my creatine and I feel like so great. Like all of a sudden, like I'm dialed in, and I don't know like how much that's super true.
My bias is totally, I'm like, I take creatine, full disclosure. And like, I'm like, I feel great taking
Yeah.
that. It could be placebo. I'm totally willing to admit that, but it does make me feel good.
And I'm not here to say it doesn't, and I think it might. I mean, I'm trying to like put it in my grandma's coffee like every day. So like, we are giving it to all family members that I love and care about. But the brain does make its own source of creatine. It's very much less than the body, and there's no like direct flight paths from the body to the brain. There's this thing called the blood-brain barrier. Nobody gets by it except really important people in very specific pathways. And so it's not like when you take creatine, it's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to go straight to your brain. The brain uptake is very, very low. And so they are looking at like, wow, it seems like maybe if you had a TBI or if there's some kind of inflammation going on, maybe the fluidity in the blood-brain barrier to uptake the creatine into the brain, that might be like sort of conditionally able to take more creatine up into the brain. It's also a lot more complicated than we think. You think, okay, well, let's just take a whole bunch of creatine, which it seems like 20 grams a day to pass the blood-brain barrier. But then there's also this complicated thing that when you look into it, once you start taking that much exogenously or outside, it seems to downregulate how much you make. It also downregulates the receptor at your brain to let the creatine through. And so we don't even have a lot of that receptor to begin with. And so what people are working on now, which is really exciting, is like, okay, well, what about the creatine precursors? Rather than the creatine itself and like jamming it in to hope some of it gets across, especially if you hit your head, then let's look at these precursors that might be able to get into the brain and fuel it there. We do see some great studies, a lot in mice, but like a couple in humans that are showing maybe, especially women, even though we don't get the same performance benefits, although we get some, we might get more depression benefits, or alleviation of depression. Depression is hard to measure. It's a 3 to 6 month or more kind of symptomology. It's got a lot going on, but that still says that there could be some impact from creatine on mood. And I'm excited about the future research, but kind of like Dr. Spencer said, um, there's a lot of hype there, and we're like trying to catch up with the hype, and people are doing a lot of research to try to back up the hype and find out, well, how and what and why and where. And we aren't totally there yet, but it is at the forefront. And one thing I do want to say is like when I looked into it in the Alzheimer's disease world, it turns out like one kind of thing that happens in Alzheimer's disease, it seems like it overactivates creatine kinase, which means that if you have more creatine, it just like is a toxin to the nerve cells. So that's like, okay, it's a space where we're like, okay, it's not just going to be a simple fix. It's a lot more going on in the brain than we originally thought. What we do know is there is creatine there. It can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it might be really good for a lot of different things. But again, I'm sort of like,
But it's early days.
it's early days, and it's exciting early days, but like, because it's exciting, that's why people are working on it.
All right, so creatine for the brain, we're keeping an eye on it, but it does seem to be really beneficial and safe for muscle. So maybe you get an extra benefit from brain if you're taking it for that purpose. Give me one, Dr. Oppezzo, that you're like, I'm over it. It's just not, the data is not panning out here.
The branched chain amino acids. Oh no, this is a trio of really special.
My athletes love this one, branched chain amino acids. They love
I
it.
know, and it's been in the gym lore for decades for good reason too. We're like, wow, okay. Like they used to win the Grammys for muscle growth, and now they're waiting tables. So basically what happened is leucine, of the three of the branched chain amino acids, leucine was the one that was like the Justin Timberlake and went off and like had its own solo career. Leucine is the big one that made it happen. And there was this whole thing called the leucine threshold hypothesis, which is like, dude, if you don't have enough leucine, you're not going to stimulate the muscles to grow. You need enough leucine to stimulate the muscle to grow. So everyone's like, leucine, 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 forget the other amino acids. And that was going for a while. But it turns out if you have enough protein, like just whole protein, like all the essential amino acids, the 9 essential amino acids, that kind of covers it. Because one thing with leucine is it tells you to start building, but then everybody's like, well, wait, all we have is you. Like, we don't have any other amino acids to build anything. So it's sort of like, thanks, Lou. Like, we can't really build anything. So it turns out like actual whole protein is better than just leucine. And I will say once again, I hate that it depends. It's boring. It doesn't play well on Instagram, but it does depend if you're older, if you're not able to eat as much, protein, and maybe there's some benefit to protein and leucine on top of that. We're not quite there yet, though. That's again exciting. We'll look at it. But for now, by the way, leucine by itself tastes horrible. So like athletes before were like, the worse it tastes, the better it is. And I get it, right? When you're trying to get that extra second, but awesome. You don't have to do it anymore. You could just take protein and you're okay.
Yeah, I think you said something that's super important there. And people are asking about the precursors for creatine too, which are 3 amino acids. When we look at the protein literature and we see the 9 essential amino acids, which in nutrition means you must eat them because you cannot make them. That seems to be the critical threshold, is getting enough of those 9, and your body will take care of them and use them appropriately in your system. And so this goes for things like creatine, this goes for muscle production, is that as long as you're getting enough, and that goes right back to Dr. Oppezzo saying 1.2 to 1.6 grams per day, per kilo per day, then you're probably getting enough. And supplementing on top of that is, really wanting to be thinking about getting up into that 1.2 to 1.6 range rather than trying to target those specific amino acids.
Just to kill the
Yeah.
metaphor, sorry, I have to kill this metaphor. The choir of all the essential amino acids is much better than the solo artists at
So
this
who's the choir? Who's your favorite choir? What's the band?
Oh, like, I mean, all of the 9 essentials, but like any protein source. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't, I used to think it had to be animal only. It could be animal or plant, like, and it doesn't have to be all at once. You can have your beans and then your rice, like later. It doesn't matter. But as long as you get enough of the whole choir, right? And the choir has to include those 9, then don't go for the Justin Timberlakes only.
I love the analogies that you're using. You're just like the queen of metaphor. But I am getting a lot of questions here. And then Dr. Spencer, get ready, because I'm going to come back to you about what you're keeping your eye on. In this vein of protein, we're getting a lot of questions in the chat about collagen. And I feel like this is an important moment to highlight the idea between essential amino acids and not essential amino acids. So Dr. Pezzo, can you just very briefly talk about what is collagen and is it useful?
Yeah. So great. Collagen is used in a lot of things, including our face, our skin, our elastin, like also our joints. And it's non-essential amino acids. So again, I'm going to quote Stu Phillips, who's like the king of all of this, queen, everything of all of this. He basically says, if you go on an island and you only have whey protein, you're going to live. If you only have collagen protein, you're going to die. And here's the thing is, like, if we think of protein as Legos, it only gets into your body as 1 or 2 pieces of Lego, right? So if it comes in as this big complicated collagen formation, it's only you're gonna break down all of the Legos and you get single and double pieces. Now, is it true that once it gets into your body's like, whoa, you guys, this came from collagen. And you know what? She really wants it right here. So let's just put it all back together into collagen and shove it right there. That doesn't happen. And we actually don't see that in the literature. And I'm very sad about this. And I'm also very sad that we don't see it panning out yet in the joint space. I don't see good solid evidence. Maybe you do, Rachel. I think it's exciting someday, maybe. But right now, our body dissolves it and then it gets maybe used for other things.
Yeah, I'll add on to that a little bit too, is when we're thinking about the rebuilding of those Legos in your system, whether it's because you want it to hit right here, or maybe it's a joint or something like that. The real star of the choir, if you will, the solo artist, is going to be vitamin C. That's what your body needs to create collagen in the system. So as long as you're getting enough protein on board and you have enough vitamin C, your body's going to be pretty good at making its own collagen. So that's going to be pretty key. All right, Dr. Spencer, I'm going to ask you to myth bust one because it's coming up in the chat and it just keeps coming up, and it has to do with gut health and it has to do with protein. And then I'm going to ask you what you're keeping your eye on. Glutamine, L-glutamine. Are we taking this for the gut or are we not taking this for the gut? Because it is hot right now.
This is one there's actually pretty good data on. So L-glutamine in 2 specific areas, there's great data. Well, in my opinion, it's great. It's robust enough to consider it for a supplement. So post-exercise gut symptoms. So L-glutamine is really important for maintaining barrier integrity. It's one of these molecules that's involved in kind of the symphony that is gut barrier integrity. And when you exercise, it's a big challenge to your gut barrier, right? You're directing all of the blood flow away from the gut, right? There's this adrenergic state when you're exercising. You've got the adrenaline, all of the epinephrine. It's going to shunt blood towards your muscles away from your gut. And then the inverse is rest and digest. So essentially, when we're exercising, it's the exact inverse of digesting. And this is a big challenge both during exercise to get calories and then post-exercise to get calories and protein. And there's a nice study that showed L-glutamine supplementation can help reduce post-exercise GI symptoms and potentially even throughout the study during exercise. GI
right.
symptoms.
So this is something we could consider if we've got.
I think so, yeah. If your problem is that you have some GI symptomatology either during or after exercise, I think, and you're looking to specifically enhance some sort of barrier function as the theoretical target, then I think it makes sense. In irritable bowel syndrome, so patients who have GI symptoms already, supplementing L-glutamine on top of that did help with those symptoms. And this was 5 grams 3 times a day, so quite a bit. And that ends up being quite expensive as well. There haven't been a lot of good dose finding studies to show if you could go down. So I've tried it myself for periods of time, and it does end up being quite a bit of money and quite a lot of scoops. It is, at the end of the day, protein, which will be helpful. But I think in those two instances, there's fairly good evidence, and it's one of the more evidence-based supplements for gut health, actually.
Interesting. All right. You just myth busted for me because I have never been sure about that one. So I'm excited to get that answer. Okay. So then, Dr. Spencer, I'm going to stick with you. What are you looking at that you're excited about? Maybe we're not quite there yet, but you're like, this is something to keep an eye on.
So I described probiotics previously. These, when you go to the store and there are aisles filled with probiotics, they're usually just lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. If you look at what's in our guts, these two represent much less than 1% of what's in our guts. And I think they may be unique in their anti-inflammatory potential, and they likely are. But I think there's a bit of a paradigm shift of actual bugs that are intended to colonize, and that the rest of that 99% we can now grow and in theory sell. There are a few companies, these are ones that are considered next generation probiotics. And so there are a few companies out there selling them. However, one of these next generation probiotics that people may have heard of is Akkermansia muciniphila.
There's a lot of people asking about Akkermansia in the.
There is a great study published in Nature Medicine, which is a fantastic journal in metabolic syndrome. And giving live Akkermansia had a really nice benefit. Giving heat-killed Akkermansia had the exact same benefit. In Europe, Akkermansia is sold as a heat-killed supplement. In the US, it's sold as a live supplement. There was a study, granted it was out of China, and all microbiomes are somewhat regionally distinct. When they give live Akkermansia to people, it doesn't colonize in the majority of individuals. If you can colonize someone with Akkermansia, are they going to have more benefit? These are questions we don't know. But again, this paradigm is being fulfilled over and over again of if something is of benefit, it typically is of benefit if you kill it and just give it as a supplement. But what I'm really looking for in the future is identifying patients that have microbiomes that need bugs that they're missing and specifically replacing those bugs. And this may be something that's more on the FDA regulatory route, and these won't be called probiotics. These will be considered live biotherapeutic products, LBPs, for a specific indication. And that indication may be that you're missing XYZ bugs in your microbiome. We can detect that and we can give these back. It's probably about 5 to 10 years away from now, but they're, in theory, this next generation of probiotics will be considered safe, may eventually be sold over the counter, and may help us with things like fiber intake. I have tons of patients in my clinic, and in general, we don't eat a ton of fiber. When we start eating fiber, our guts sometimes have a problem with it, particularly athletes. If you eat a ton of fiber and then you go and exercise, it can make you feel heavy and less than ideal. However, that phenomena may lie in the microbiome, and we may be able to microbiome enhance fiber degradation and fiber tolerance. So you could take a microbiome and you could change it and meaningfully change it through some intervention, and then that would make someone better tolerant of fiber, and they could then eat beans all day, which would be great.
That would be great because beans, they're good for your heart. So
And we could make a probiotics beans don't make you fart. That would be key. There are people that eat tons of beans and have no gas.
That's
So
incredible.
it's a very humorous topic, but one that has a lot of interesting science behind it. And there is absolutely no reason why we couldn't design a microbiome in the future when we learn how to change microbiomes so that you could eat a ton of beans, tolerate them, get all the protein, and process the fiber in a way that you wouldn't have much gas.
That's
It's in theory very possible in the next 10 to 20 years.
okay. That is so cool and really amazing to think about how the science is behind this as well. And it's not just kind of like product formulations that are being pulled out of thin air, that there's actually some data behind where this is going. So that's super exciting. All right, Dr. Oppezzo, I'm going to turn to you, and then I want to pivot to the last question, which is, how do people know and navigate this space? And then I'll open it up to the questions in the chat. So go ahead and put your questions in. Dr. Oppezzo, I'm going to finish the overall questions about supplements with you. What are you bullish about? What are you looking at? What's coming down that you think is interesting?
So I don't have as exciting of a forefront on the muscle front. I think a lot of drugs actually are going to be in the pipeline for sarcopenia. And I think that's like a non-supplement route that I'm really watching for. And I think that's really going to be the most effective. I'm also looking, I know this sounds like old hat, but omega-3s.
People are asking about that in the chat. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I'm still stoked about omega-3s. They are they have shown some promise for mitigating muscle loss. One of the things that our lab's really worried about right now is kind of what happens with a disuse event. What can you stop if you're really sick, you're in the hospital, you can't move, you're caretaking, whatever. Like what can help hold on to that muscle when you're like, dude, I can't do a leg press. So I think omega-3s is kind of a direction. Again, it's too early to know, but there is some promise there. The problem here is we don't have exact mechanism. So it's really hard to target and figure out how to do that. And the omega-3s in general, I think are very anti-inflammatory. They've shown, I mean, one of the omega-3s they actually sell as a drug. It's EPA only, and it's for high triglycerides. And so there is a lot of good effect on that. If I can talk about it later, put in the show notes about the AFib study on omega-3s. It's a very low base rate, but it does, and it's only in really high risk heart patients, but it is something that in a high dose, if you are at risk for AFib, it is something to talk to your doctor about. I definitely don't think that means that we shouldn't keep going down this route, but it's, again, just the space is complicated. It's not going to always be more is better, and this thing solves is the single solution for this problem.
I just think you just pivoted so beautifully into the next and sort of final question as we start to look at the questions in the chat, which is something that any of us that operate in the space know. A little might be good and a lot might not be better, right? And so when we look at supplements, we often think about a U-shaped curve where specifically if we're looking at nutrients, I studied vitamin D for a long period of time. We know that vitamin D in very low doses is not good for you. We're also starting to figure out that vitamin D in very high doses is really not good for you either. But that there's a sweet spot in the middle, and it's really hard for the general population to navigate this space. So, Dr. Spencer, I'm going to come back to you for just a second. Can you give a few tips and tricks to people to try and figure out, dosage, safe supplements to have? What are some things that you look for as an MD that's prescribing perhaps or talking to your patients about this, that how they should navigate this space?
Mm-hmm. You have a couple of thoughts here. I think this is another supporting concept for food as a supplement.
Mm-hmm.
And food is kind of naturally limited. It has a diversity. And I think this is by nature, supplements are concentrated and you're giving a concentrated product. And I think that by nature carries some degree of overdose risking if you don't use them carefully. But I think whole foods, because they're not concentrated, are a little bit lower risk in this category. So it's a good argument for whole foods. I think probiotics fall into this trap, right? You'll see that more is better, and you'll see how much CFUs. And in some GI disease states, taking a lot of live probiotics may not be ideal. And that is one risk that I think more live organisms are not always going to be of benefit. And then lastly, I think supplements, as we've discussed, are not as tested. Something that I think a lot about in the GI realm is liver toxicity, right? Our liver is this important organ for detoxifying all of these substances in our diet and in general. And sometimes these concentrated supplements can cause some degree of liver damage if taken in an excess amount. And like we said at the beginning, this long list of things that get appreciated as side effects when the FDA approves a drug, supplements are not as well tested, and sometimes these side effects are not as well appreciated. Um, and so I think that there does need to be some caution when using supplements. The best path forward, I think, really being careful. What does the bottle say? What do health organizations say? What are the recommendations of dietitians and physicians? And doing this in coordination with some sort of allied provider, whoever that may be, is really important.
I so appreciate that. And a resource that I use a lot, I use it with my students, I use it with a lot of clients that I work with, is examine.com. I have no affiliation with them. But what they do is a really nice job of aggregating the data in a way that's very user friendly. They talk about effect size, which is essentially how much of a difference this supplement can make, as well as the dosages that were used to have that effect. And we're getting a lot of questions in the chat about, how does this supplement work for that disease? Or how does this supplement work for that disease? And this is a really nice resource that will kind of rank it out for you. And they give it a grade of A to F, essentially. So examine.com is really terrific. We tried to get their CEO to come and be a part of this webinar, but unfortunately they're in a big planning phase, but they're a great resource for people to really start to tease this out. Dr. Spencer, you said something that I think is really important on the backside, and I'm going to throw it over to Dr. Oppezzo, because you are a registered dietitian, and it's come up in the chat a lot, is who is the expert here? Like, who should we be turning to? Because it seems like there's a lot of distrust in the space. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what the education is of a lot of the healthcare professionals. So can you give us a quick and dirty on, like, who is the person that we should be consulting on supplement use and all of these, parameters that go around with seeking out the products themselves? Dr. Pezzo, I'm throwing that one to you.
Sorry, I thought you were I heard Dr. Spencer qualifying it. Okay, so yeah. So what I will say is, and I think I can turn it back to you, Rachel, as you did a study on this you shared with me, is like, Dr. Spencer aside, MDs and medical school doesn't train in nutrition. And if at a very least, maybe an hour seminar on it, it seems. And also, they, aren't really there for reading literature, right? The PhD or the higher ed, like learning of like how to read the research articles, or having the nutritional biochemistry background that like Dr. Spencer has and that you have. And registered dietitians usually, I mean, they have 3 years of training. They not only have to pass a test, but they're also trained in the metabolism and the biochemistry. So they can think about, like, what is this new supplement? How would I evaluate it and read the research on it and see what I think about it? And what's the possible mechanism? So I guess I'm going to put a plug out for registered dietitians, not affiliated, except that I am one. But I just think, and people with PhDs in nutrition biochemistry and nutrition, or some kind of concentrated training in it, because it is a space that is separate, and you can really go into deep dives in school when you're really focused on just this, as opposed to medical school, which is broadly treating a lot different of diseases.
So you're saying we shouldn't be getting our nutrition advice from podcasts?
No. Well, it depends who the podcast is with. So, but I think also, just as a consumer, let's say you don't have an RD to go to, or you don't have, someone with nutritional biochemistry background. That would be my first space, is to go to somebody who has this training. The second idea is like, okay, like, where is the research on this? Is there legitimate peer-reviewed research on that? And then if you're really dead set on getting this supplement, supplement, I always tell people you need to get a third-party testing. We don't suggest brands here because, sometimes batch to batch, these batches might change. There's no oversight in this world. Like, what is it? Like 1% of melatonin supplements have what it says it has in it. So if you have a third-party verification system like Consumer Labs or, NSF, like seal of approval, these are things that we can say that at least somebody went out, looked at this batch of this vitamin or supplement, and it has what it says it has in it. It doesn't have contaminants and it's bioavailable. Now, does it say it's safe or effective? No. But it does say that at least this bottle that you're getting off the store, shelf has what you think it has in it. So if you're dead set on this supplement or multivitamin or whatever it is, at least make sure it's third party verified. I think that's like the lowest bar that I would advocate for. Because just like Dr. Spencer said, when you throw all these things together, even if you have a whole bunch of research on this one supplement and you're like, no, I'm good to go. What about the other 5? And we're taking it together, right? So nobody's done like what you're taking all at once to see how that affects the liver, for example. So I think I just would play caution when playing sort of pharmacist on ourselves and just try to get a nutrition professional. At the very least, make sure that you have some evidence of background on this and then look for third-party verification.
Yeah, I'll put a plug. I'll put a little plug in for my MD friends is that I did this work for a really long time, training MDs and also nurse practitioners on nutrition. In the early days of their training, so the first 4 years, it is true that there is not a lot of nutrition education, but within specialties, oftentimes as doctors start to specialize, and Dr. Spencer is a great example of this, he needs to know about all of these nutritional supplements, how they affect the gut, how they affect different safety parameters and inflammation. And even if he didn't have a PhD, I would imagine that you're probably pretty well trained in this space. So I would say to add on to, I'm a huge fan of dietitians. I trained them for years and years. Find the MDs that have a specialty in the place where you are seeking to use that supplement for, and they will likely have an expertise around that. So I'm seeing a lot of like negative Nancy's in the chat talking about the MDs, and I want to give a little love to them, is that yes, they do have expertise oftentimes in the area that they tend to specialize in. So go to those MDs that specialize in the place that you need attention. All right, so go ahead and put the final questions in the chat. We were going to do a rapid fire, but do we still want to do that, or do we want to get right to the questions? Rapid fire real quick?
I like
all right,
rapid fire. It's kind of fun.
3 minutes of rapid fire. Here's what we're going to do. Dr. Oppezzo and Dr. Spencer, you're going to say either use it or lose it based upon your understanding of the literature. And this is for the general population. So yes, there's a caveat to everything, right? All right, here's the list. I'm gonna go fast. And I'm going to assign, Dr. Oppezzo will say it first and Dr. Spencer will say second. Yeah, okay. No pressure, merely. All right, multivitamin.
Why not?
No, the answers are use it or lose it.
Shoot. All right, use it if you have to. Yes, use it.
Use it.
Vitamin D.
Use it with Rachel's caveat.
Use it and get tested for vitamin D deficiency with your physician.
Hey, yeah. I'm coming back to that question in just a second. Vitamin C.
Yeah, use it especially if you hate fruit.
Use it, but try and eat fruit first.
Electrolyte powders.
Use it if you're running marathons.
Yeah, if you're sweating a lot, use it.
Melatonin.
Lose it.
Lose it.
Greens powders.
Lose it.
Lose it.
Mushroom blends. These are hot. Everybody's asking about lion's mane and all the things in the chat.
I'm sorry, don't hate me, lose it.
I think if you enjoy it, go for it.
Love it. Love it. Yes.
All right, this one's controversial. You ready? Colostrum.
Ooh, lose it with a question mark?
Needs more research. Has extreme potential for specific indications.
Okay.
That's my question.
Last one is, this one's come up in the chat a lot too, ketones.
To what end? Stay tuned, but lose it.
A lot of potential, but not necessary. Lose it.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to finish off with, we've got 5 minutes left here with some of the sort of like major themes that came up in the chat. This one came up over and over and over again. And Dr. Spencer, you just mentioned it. Should people be getting their blood tested before they start a supplement and or during their supplementation regimen?
Yes, I think this gets to what we were saying is what is your target? And the ideal world, I think vitamin D is a great example. A lot of people are deficient. It will often be covered by insurance to get it tested with your primary care doctor or a specialist, and then you can treat to a target. There's not a huge concern about vitamin D overdosing if you know that you're deficient and can get it remeasured in 6 months. The problem and the caveat is that we have to admit and stay humble as scientists and as physicians that we're not good at measuring health, quantifying health. This is a huge grand challenge of this generation is how to quantify health and how to move it in a positive direction. And I think that this is the elephant in the room is that some of these things we're not good at quantifying and measuring. So I'd say, yes, if you have a deficiency that can be tested and supplement towards it, that's great with the caveat that as a medical profession and as a scientific community, we are still getting better at measuring things and understanding deficiencies.
So getting one of these like panels that you can order on the internet with like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of metabolites probably isn't the way to go about this.
It's probably low yield. The biggest damage is probably going to be to your wallet. But again, I think this may be the future of in 10 years, it may be validated and we may go from a list of 100 to a list of 10 key ones that have the most benefit. But this is the direction that we should be headed to maximize longevity and health.
I so appreciate that. Dr. Oppezzo, same question to you is what are some diagnostics that you think that we should be thinking about? I'm specifically looking at a lot of questions about peri and postmenopausal women, and should we be monitoring things like hormones and things like that around our supplementation?
Yeah, right now the hormonal measurement is very popular, but it hasn't been useful. You can't diagnose whether or not you're in perimenopause because your estrogens can fluctuate from 0 to 2000 in an hour, and who knows why and where. And I think sometimes it gets into the space where people feel a little gaslit, where they get their hormones measured, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're fine, and you must not be in perimenopause yet." And they're like, "But I'm having hot flashes. I can't sleep." So I don't think hormone measuring we're there yet. I think someday we'll have continuous hormone measurement like CGMs for hormones, and we're not there
Cool.
yet. So
Yeah,
I don't think that until we get there, I don't think it's a well spent time or worry to measure hormones yet. But I'm like Dr. Spencer, there are some things we do have good measures on. And I think, to give a better shout out to MDs, I didn't mean to slam them. They're amazing. And if they're trained in nutrition, a lot of them are like, that's awesome. They also know a lot about this measurement space. So if your MD's sort of like, hey, like, I don't think you should measure your serum calcium levels because that's not going to tell us what your bones are, that they're right. We don't always have great metrics, but some things we do. And for perimenopause, and we don't have good metrics if you're in it right now.
Yeah, especially surrounding some of the supplementation. So another theme that's come up, and we'll wrap it up here because I feel like this is right in both of your wheelhouse, is this idea of supplementing for and potentially eating a diet to reduce inflammation. So I and Dr. Oppezzo, you and I both work in the sort of human performance space where sometimes you do want a little inflammation after you exercise, right? And that's actually going to be the signal to your immune system to come and fix something. And yet we are on this kick right now that everything should be reducing inflammation and it should be anti-inflammatory. And I know in our space, in the human performance and athletic space, you can actually impair training if you overdo it with these anti-inflammatories. Particularly, there's some interesting data coming out about greens powders and some of these really highly concentrated supplements. So I'm going to turn it back over to you both. And Dr. Oppezzo, I'll start with you. And Dr. Spencer, I'll finish off with you. What are some supplements that people should be thinking about with regard to inflammation? Should they be trying to reduce inflammation? And maybe what are your thoughts on what they should or should not be using?
I don't know. That's hard to answer in 30 seconds, but I will agree with you that inflammation, it's like a buzzword, anti-inflammatory, and it's like it's so much more complicated than we know. Like some inflammation is good because it's healing, it's recovering, it's signaling your body to, get stronger, and then some is bad. So too much of anything, I think, is a good theme of this whole thing. Too much of anything is bad, not enough of anything is bad. You can't go wrong if you eat sort of anti-inflammatory Mediterranean style diet. And I like to tell people like 80%, 20%. It gets really stressful if you're like, I will only eat anti-inflammatory foods, then you lose all your friends and nobody has ice cream with you. So I think that you should, think, okay, like overall lifestyle, just anti-inflammatory Mediterranean foods, like 80% of the time is a really good place where you won't get into the point of over concentrated anti-inflammatories killing a process you might want. But yeah, anyway, I'll stop there. That's my 30-second answer.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to finish it off here and then we'll wrap it up with Dr. Spencer, because this is actually your area of expertise, is utilizing strategies to reduce inflammation. Take us home, Dr. Spencer.
That's right. I think just as there is gut health, there is immune health. And immune health isn't the absence of inflammation, it's appropriately timed, appropriate magnitude inflammation. It's like you said, those that are chronically inflamed are always have kind of a medium level of inflammation. Those that exercise and have good immune health, they have low inflammation, they exercise and they have appropriate inflammation that tells the body what to do. And the key issue is to have this dynamic system, right? Homeostasis is the ability to kind of respond to what comes. And I think that's immune health. We shouldn't just be suppressing immune signals. We should be allowing the immune system to function appropriately. And that's really what I'm focused on in the weeds of understanding the arrows and mechanisms of how do you prevent chronic inflammation to allow for these physiologic bouts of beneficial inflammation. So yeah, the immune system is great. It keeps us alive. It allows us to repair our muscles and become great athletes and live long lives. And we shouldn't be anti-immune system. We should just be pro-immune health. And that's another kind of like borderline meaningless term, another buzzword, but on the science side, I think there's a lot to back this, and we have ways to get in the weeds and measure immune health that we have coming
So
forward.
is there any supplements that can help us enhance our immune health, or are we mostly relying on food for this?
I think both. Fermented foods, I think, are really potent. And I think that the important thing about food is that it's circadian. Our body has a lot of these circadian rhythms, and exercise and food are key. There's exercise, food, and sleep. And this is how our body knows what time of day it is. It knows how much cortisol to make. Cortisol is another great example. Cortisol is critical for health and for sleep-wake cycles. And we shouldn't be battling cortisol. We should be battling chronic low levels of cortisol. We need to have very low levels of cortisol at some times of day and very high levels of cortisol at other times of days. And the dynamic range between these two is what should be determining health. And again, this is an example of what we need to be better at measuring. It may be that in the future that one of these companies, you would want to take a first morning blood sample, go and run 5 miles, take a sample, and then eat a diet, and then wait another 5 hours and take a third sample. And then you would measure the delta and response and recovery of all of these molecules. And I think we need to think more about the context of these blood tests and what we're doing in our daily lives and how to really optimize our body's beneficial response to exercise and food.
I so appreciate that take. And I think it's a great way to end it here, is that there is some really good, very advanced science and some incredible scientists. You are looking at two of them here that are just doing really thoughtful work on figuring out how the nuance of all of this matters. We tend to get a lot of hype and headlines, and there's a lot behind the scenes that we need to think about with regard to supplementation and diet and the effect that it's having on our bodies. So I'd love to give a huge plug to Stanford Lifestyle Medicine for hosting this amazing webinar. I'm seeing all the incredible comments in the Q&A. So thank you so much. And please do go to our website, make sure that you are reading the blog. If you want more background on myself, Dr. Oppezzo, Dr. Spencer, we all have profiles on the website, as well as we do deep dive newsletter mailings to you all to really get into the nuance behind all of this using our amazing faculty. So thank you all so much, and have a beautiful day. Dr. Oppezzo, Dr. Spencer, so appreciate your time and your knowledge today on supplementation, gut health, muscle health, aging, longevity, and really cutting through the noise for us. So have a great day, team, and we will see you soon for a future webinar.